Welcome back to Sitting with Spirit, my loves, the part of the podcast where I sit with our angels, our guides, our loved ones in spirit, and give them messages for the collective. As always, take what resonates for you, leave the rest, and run everything through the barometer of your own heart space. And if you know somebody who might benefit from this message, please feel free to send it their way. So, the first thing that I wanted to share was this really cute download that I got from my angels in meditation today, which is basically about how it's not helpful to compare our spiritual gifts with other people. And I've been reading the memoir of Gordon Higginson, a really famous medium in the UK. And he is talking so much about being clairaudient, which is psychic hearing. And that's so helpful for mediumship because people can literally be like, my name was Vanessa. And it's not that I can't get names in mediumship readings, but it's more that I know them instead of hear them. So sometimes I can find myself being a little jealous of people who are really good with clairaudience. That being said, he's also talking a lot in his book about clairvoyance and how it's rare for somebody to be a true clairvoyant, but where clairaudience is so helpful for mediumship, clairvoyance is so helpful for psychic work. They all feed each other, and all of our psychic senses play into all different types of spiritual gifts. They're not like on an island, like if you're this clair, you can only do this type of reading. But there are certain clairs that maybe are very conducive to different types of connection. And so I was sitting in meditation, and my two main psychic senses are feeling and knowing. And basically, my angels said, that's what makes you the perfect vessel for us. And that was such a beautiful reminder because the type of spirit guides that we connect with, the type of clairs that come online most naturally to us, the type of things that excite us and light us up make us a perfect vessel for the type of spirit guides working with us, working through us. And if we were all the same, why would we come here to Earth? We came here to be different. We came here to experience polarity, and we all have our own different gifts for a reason. And instead of trying to fit ourselves into a box of what someone else's gift is, fully embracing our own psychic gifts is so special and powerful because that's exactly how you're meant to be. And so, what they were telling me is that those with high clairsentience, or clairsentience being their primary clair, are really conducive to working with angelic energy because angels have never been human. Whereas, like, past loved ones in spirit are more literal in the way that they speak. Like, my name was Steve. I played basketball. I died of a heart attack. And that can be very helpful to hear them or to see images of how they were and even feel them, of course, is very important. Angels speak so much through feelings of unconditional love and peace and through knowings. And when they do give words or symbols, they're very like ethereal and symbolic. It's almost like our consciousness on earth. I'm not going to say it's the densest consciousness because I don't know every single consciousness that exists, but then the spirit world, which is like our past loved ones, and that's like a next level of consciousness because they have been human. And then angels are even a different layer of consciousness, and feeling is very conducive to that layer of consciousness. So basically, where I'm going with this is whatever clair or psychic gift or predilection you have, don't dismiss that trying to tune in or form yourself to someone else's psychic gift because you're perfectly in alignment with how your guides want to work, how your heart is called to be of service, and that you're right on time and you're right where you're meant to be. It's interesting because I was taking a clairvoyance workshop online, and everybody really approached it completely differently. Like, we all had to basically platform in front of each other and read for each other in front of the group. And one girl heard the name of the person she was supposed to go to. One person saw like a name being written on a chalkboard, and that's how he knew he was supposed to go to that person. For me, it feels like the computer screen in front of me is like a energetic map, and I feel pulled to somebody on that map. So everybody gets the message in different ways, and that's beautiful. It would be so much less fun if we were all the exact same in our spiritual practices. So celebrate the diversity, celebrate the differences. That's what makes it so fun and magical. So, that being said, The first thing I saw from our angels was this image of a tap of water being turned on. And it felt like if we've been feeling kind of like crunchy and ready for things to move forward and a little frustrated, and like we have these visions, we know what we want to do, we know what's not really working, but we don't really know how to move forward or what that looks like. This tap turning on felt like to me inspiration starting to flow. And that's going to create more flow in terms of how we move forward and our inspiration and our imagination and our creativity and where we go next. It's like the energy is starting to move. And that felt really exciting. And I am seriously like buzzing from my conversation with Michael. I just loved it so much. And his energy was just so powerful. And so, as soon as I started tuning in to what our angels and guides wanted us to know for this week, I still felt very blended with his energy because he and I, like, really were in an open, beautiful space together. And immediately I started seeing this red light. And that was so synchronistic to me because he spoke about that in the episode about how that red light signifies the mother and the goddess. And I just saw this beautiful, warm, healing red light. And my face started feeling really hot, like I was going to sweat, like starting to just get so burning hot in my cheeks. And for me, when I get that feeling in my face, it's phoenix energy. It's like death and rebirth, and now is the fire, the rebirth, the rising from the ashes. And that feels so, so exciting and transformative. And then I got a really interesting message about bones, which also felt very synchronistic to me. And I always feel like the episodes prime my consciousness for what wants to come through in Sitting with Spirit. And I don't ever think that's an accident. And so I was getting this really interesting message about bones, particularly animal skulls, as a commemoration of the consciousness that was, and how there was something about part of the shedding of the ashes and the moving forward is the commemoration of what was. It's like sometimes part of the release is celebrating the aspects of what we're leaving behind because what we're leaving behind and what no longer works for us worked for a previous version of us. And there's still honoring to be had in that. And it's almost like this sense of just because something died or has to die away in the metaphorical sense doesn't mean that it's just like forgetting about it, leaving it behind, and throwing the baby out with the bathwater and just completely moving forward. I feel like there's something about taking the time to honor what we're letting go of and saying, thank you for serving me, even if it's a story of self. I was thinking about that as we were recording the episode and I forgot to say it. There was actually a moment where I was going to say it and then the riverside like completely cut off. And Michael and I were laughing because that happens to us all the time. And that's kind of what happens when two mediums are together. Like it happened with another episode of Magic Hour as well. And so I was getting this message when we were talking about shielding and protection spells that those types of spells aren't always only for external purposes. Sometimes we need the shielding and the reflection for our own unkindness to ourselves, to outdated stories of self, to ancestral patterns that aren't serving us. And I was getting this image of inherited beliefs and needing energetic protection from that. Sometimes we can think about it as this person is trying to hurt me, this person is abusing me, this person is mistreating me. But what within us allows that behavior? And this was a really tough lesson for me to learn when I was in my narcissistic abusive relationship of 4.5 years. There's a part of me that was the enabler for that. And that was the part of me that I had to do deep forgiveness work for, was that I allowed myself to be treated that way. So this isn't to victim shame or blame, but it's just saying where might we do deeper shielding and magical spells on the aspects of self that are not authentic, but have been taught or inherited and are discordant with our true self, which is love. And to think about some of our magical practices that way as we move through the spring equinox, which is equal of light and dark. That's why I also really liked what Michael said about the 9 and 7 exercise. It's like the balance. It's not all shadow work, it's not all light. It's a balance of both, and it's a really beautiful time for that. So that leads me back to the bones. And so when you find things, it's almost like the skeletons in your closet. There's like kind of two different messages here. One is the commemoration of what has been. And so I feel like, say, for example, you used to have a limiting belief that it wasn't safe to be seen. That might have served you in a time where you felt like you had to hide to stay safe or whatever that case was. How can you thank the things you're leaving behind and no longer resonate with you for what they were trying to do? How can you make peace with them? How can you take the power back in that way so that there's no anger and resentment, but instead a space for deeper self reflection and self understanding because we don't co create with something that on some level isn't serving some part of us. And then the skeleton in the closet is that deeper shadow work, seeing the bones, seeing what has been buried. There's almost a level of ancestral healing that I feel woven in with this. So, this is a beautiful moment energetically in terms of the light and the shadow. I think it's a really ripe moment for deep reflection, for really reflecting on what part of what we are leaving behind served us for the time that it did, and getting really clear on how it no longer serves us now and creating space for something new to fill. I then saw my symbol of a sunrise. And when I see a sunrise, it's my sign for the light coming back after a really tough chapter, a chapter of a lot of question marks, of unknowns, of darkness. And with that, I was getting a lot of tingles in my solar plexus chakra. And the solar plexus is so tied to bravery, stories of self, identity, confidence, personal power. And I feel like the lights are being turned on and we are being activated in this. And I kept seeing butterflies and hearts as like signs from our angels around this of living in alignment with love, spreading our wings, bursting out of the chrysalis. So everything is kind of saying the same thing, and that it just feels like a energized moment. It feels like a moment to turn on, and it feels like a moment where we can turn to our own healing work with new bravery and lightness as well. And then I saw a really interesting image. And if you're a longtime listener of Magic Hour, you'll know that in a few different sitting with spirits, there's been this message of the pathway. And usually the pathway has different sort of colors of light or ways that it shows itself, which is the collective strategy for how to move forward. And right now, the pathway transformed into a winding river. And I feel like the way we move forward now is to flow, is to allow ourselves to be carried, is to not try to swim upstream, is to flow with spirit, like that water element is like spiritual connections, empathy, emotions, compassion, cleansing, release, all that water element stuff, letting ourselves flow. And I feel like there might be twists, there might be turns, like it's a winding river. And instead of trying to hold on to a branch and swim to the shore, let yourself be taken with it because it's leading you exactly where you need to go. And along this winding river, I saw this really beautiful symbol of question marks turning into witches' hats. And it was this sense of the unknown has always felt historically so scary from like a survival mode place. We want all the answers. We want to skip to the last chapter of the book. We want to know everything that's going to happen. And when the question marks turned into witches' hats, it gave me this sense of finding playful curiosity and adventure within the unknown, tapping into our spiritual toolbox, making space for spiritual guidance, connection to the earth, our body's wisdom, all of the sort of magical practices, not feeling like we have to just have these question marks that trigger us in life, but starting to let the question marks be invitations to remember our magic. And when I see the witch's hat, there's often a connection as well with a witch wound, where we were taught that it's not safe to be powerful, to be other, to be different, to be inconvenient, to be loud, to be anything outside of what society deems normal, quote unquote normal. And so I feel like these question marks are an invitation to dream bigger, to have our own back, to tap into our own magic, to use our own voice, and to not let the question marks somehow solidify into a story of self or scarcity, but instead to let the question marks lead you into an adventure of what will fill the space and letting your magical practices inform that adventure and know that you are so supported along the journey. So, starting to go into the mediumship, I actually had two people coming through. They felt like they were two young parents who passed very young. And I was seeing a helicopter or a small plane crash. And I actually heard the name Gloria. So I don't know if that would have been the mother's name or if that might be somebody connected to them or who it's for, but I heard the name Gloria. And then I also felt like they were very in love. And I feel like they came together because they were almost this unit. Like they did everything together, they went everywhere together. Like one was always with the other. And I felt a military connection with either the dad or his side of the family. And I felt like when both of them passed, their baby would have been like a toddler age and pretty young, maybe 3 or 4. And I felt like that child was raised by their grandmother, their mom's mom. And then I felt this throat block. It felt to me like the grief of this couple's passing was so intense that the family decided we're not going to talk about it. This is too painful. We're not going to talk about it. But in that, it feels like the child that they left behind was like hungering for knowledge about them and that it turned into a painful thing for them where it's like their memory, the good parts, the love, the joyful parts about when they were here weren't celebrated or acknowledged. It was all the grief and the sadness. And it's almost like this person didn't want to poke the bear by bringing that up to their family. And I kept feeling this throat chakra block, especially with the parents in spirit, not saying they have a throat chakra block, but this feeling of we wish we could have spoken to you. We wish that we could have been there for you to show you that we are here. And so the message that I get from them is that you don't have to go off of only what other people will tell you about us because we are right here with you. And this is a message not just for this one specific person, because this podcast goes out to so many. It's a message for people who lost loved ones very young when they didn't get a chance to really know them. And there's a message here of like, invite us to sit with you. And in this particular case, I feel a piece of the mother's jewelry that might work as like a grounding object that might make you feel closer. It's not like our spirit people need that, but it might make you feel closer. And so there's a sense here of feel into us. We never left you. You don't only need to rely on outside people to tell you about us. Like we will show you that you are loved. Invite us to sit with you. And our relationship still continues in this form. And so if you've lost somebody young without getting the chance to really know them, invite that person in. And it's been really interesting because I've had a theme coming up in my readings where people are very surprised by who comes through. It's like, whoa, I was expecting my grandma, who I love so much and was so close to come through, not my alcoholic grandfather and my grandmother who passed super young that I didn't even know. And they were kind of like problems in the family. And it's like, yeah, but your grandmother knows that you know what you mean to her and you already know your sign from her and you already know that she's with you. Sometimes the people that come through in mediumship readings when they get the opportunity are the relatives who have been quote unquote forgotten or who had skeletons in the closet that no one wanted to talk about or work through. And so I think sitting with these relatives in the spirit world who we've heard stories about and letting them feel our love and connection is healing on both sides of the aisle, letting them speak to us. And the other thing that I wanted to say is that there was an element of this message of the grief of losing these two parents. But again, this could connect to anybody who has lost somebody young living in the physical body. And just because the family maybe doesn't talk about it or it's too painful doesn't mean that that deeper grief doesn't live on because the body remembers, even if the mind doesn't choose to go there. So there's stuff here about just creating sacred space And the solstices and the equinoxes are really beautiful, intentional time for this, to create sacred space, to just be in love with your ancestors, to be open to their perspective, to be open to sending love to them, for them to send love to you. It's like it's all beautiful, and it's all a part of the healing. And like I always say, our relationships don't end with physical death. They continue on in a new form, and sometimes they can be even more beautiful in this new form. So that's the message here today, is that they never left, that they're there and they're here to show you their love. Instead of you needing to be told who they will show you who they were. And to open up to that, they'll visit you in dreams. They'll find a way, as long as you set that intention and feel open and ready for that connection. And so, for anybody with kind of relatives in their family tree that could use a little more compassion or sympathy or understanding, this is a great practice for them too. Just sending love and trying to understand their perspective. And I feel like in my readings, that's a lot of the types of spirits that come through to me. It's not that the grandma that you love so much won't come through, but it's the spirits sometimes with unfinished business, or who feel misunderstood or have an apology, who really need their voice to be heard. So you don't need to just go to a medium for that, although you can go to a trusted medium in the space, an evidential medium. You can also open up to love for them and to be a healer in that way. So I'm sending you all so much love. Have a beautiful spring equinox, and we will see you next week.